The Amidah, also called the Shemona Esreh, is the central prayer of the Jewish liturgy. This prayer, among others, is found in the Siddur, the traditional Jewish prayer book. As Judaism's central prayer, the Amidah is often designated simply as tefillah in rabbinic literature. Observant Jews recite the Amidah at each of 3 prayer services in a typical weekday: morning, afternoon, and evening. A special abbreviated Amidah is also the core of the Musaf service that is recited on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and Jewish festivals. After the morning Torah reading, with various forms of the Amidah that depend on the occasion, the typical weekday Amidah actually consists of 19 blessings, though it originally had 18, when the Amidah is modified for specific prayers or occasions. The first 3 blessings and the last 3 remain constant, framing the Amidah used in each service, while the middle 13 blessings are replaced by blessings specific to the occasion. The language of the Amidah most likely dates from the Mishnah each period, both before and after the destruction of the temple, at which time it was considered unnecessary to prescribe its text and content. The Talmud indicates that when Rabbi Gamaliel II undertook to fix definitely the public service and to regulate private devotion, he directed Samuel HaKatan to write another paragraph inveighing against informers and heretics, which was inserted as the 12th prayer in modern sequence, making the number of blessings 19. Other sources, also in the Talmud, indicate, however, that this prayer was part of the original 18, and that 19 prayers came about when the 15th prayer for the restoration of Jerusalem and of the throne of David was split into 2. The prayer is recited standing with feet firmly together, and preferably while facing Jerusalem. In Orthodox public worship, the Shemona Esreh is usually first prayed silently by the congregation and is then repeated aloud by the chazan. The repetition's original purpose was to give illiterate members of the congregation a chance to participate in the collective prayer by answering Amen. Conservative and Reform congregations sometimes abbreviate the public recitation of the Amidah according to their customs. The rules governing the composition and recital of the Amidah are discussed primarily in the Talmud, in chapters 4-5 of Berakot, in the Mishneh Torah, in chapters 4-5 of Hilkot Tefillah, and in the Shulchan Aruch, laws 89-127. Origin. The language of the Amidah most likely comes from the Mishnah each period, both before and after the destruction of the temple, as the probable time of its composition and compilation. In the time of the Mishnah, it was considered unnecessary to prescribe its text and content. This may have been simply because the language was well known to the Mishnah's authors. The Mishnah may also not have recorded a specific text because of an aversion to making prayer a matter of rigor and fixed formula, an aversion that continued at least to some extent throughout the Talmudist period, as evidenced by the opinions of R. Eliezer and R. Simeon ben Yohai. R. Jose held that one should include something new in one's prayer every day, a principle said to have been carried into practice by R. Eleazar and R. Abahu. Prayer was not to be read as one would read a letter. However, even the Talmudist sources reflect such diverse opinions, including the one attributing the formulation of the Amidah to the men of the Great Synagogue, namely to the early Second Temple period, as opposed to one that explicitly ascribes the arrangement of the prayer to the activity of Rabban Gamliel in the post-destruction era at Yavneh. The Talmud names Simeon ha-Pauli as the editor of the collection in the Academy of R. Gamaliel II, at Yavneh. But this cannot mean that the benedictions were unknown before that date, for in other passages the Shemona Esreh is traced to the first wise men, and again to 120 elders, and among these a number of prophets. In order to remove the discrepancies between the latter and the former assignment of editorship, the Talmud takes refuge in the explanation that the prayers had fallen into disuse, and that Gamaliel reinstituted them. The historical kernel in these conflicting reports seems to be the indubitable fact that the benedictions date from the earliest days of the Pharisaic synagogue. They were at first spontaneous outgrowths of the efforts to establish the Pharisaic synagogue in opposition to, or at least in correspondence with, the Sadducean temple service. This is apparent from the Haggadic endeavor to connect the stated times of prayer with the sacrificial routine of the temple, the morning and the afternoon tefillah, recalling the constant offerings, while for the evening tefillah, recourse was had to artificial comparison with the sacrificial portions consumed on the altar during the night. Gamaliel too undertook finally both to fix definitely the public service and to regulate private devotion. He directed Simeon Harparcoli to edit the benedictions probably in the order they had already acquired, and made it a duty, incumbent on everyone, to recite the prayer 3 times daily. According to the Talmud, Gamaliel directed Samuel Harkatan to write another paragraph against informers and heretics, making the number 19. This edition is the 12th prayer in the modern sequence. When the Amidah is recited, on regular weekdays, the Amidah is prayed 3 times, once each during the morning, afternoon, and evening services that are known respectively as Shacharit, Mincha, and Mariv. One opinion in the Talmud claims, with support from biblical verses, that the concept for each of the 3 services was founded respectively by each of the 3 biblical patriarchs. The prescribed times for reciting the Amidah thus may come from the times of the public Tamid sacrifices that took place in the temples in Jerusalem. After the Second Temple's destruction in 70 CE, the Council of Jamnia determined that the Amidah would substitute for the sacrifices, directly applying Hosey's dictate, "So we will render for bullocks the offering of our lips." For this reason, the Amidah should be recited during the time period in which the Tamid would have been offered. Accordingly, since the Mariv service was originally optional, as it replaces the overnight burning of ashes on the temple altar rather than a specific sacrifice, Mariv's Amidah is not repeated by the Hazan, while all other Amidot are repeated. On Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and other Jewish holidays there is a Musaf Amidah to replace the additional communal sacrifices of these days. On Yom Kippur, a 5th public recitation, Nila, is added to replace a special sacrifice offered on that day.